The dope show. Been gone for a minute. Kind of laid back after the election. I had to, just collect my thoughts and get back to work, basically. I knew there was a lot of stories coming up ahead of me because of the elections and, the different states that legalize marijuana and the different things going on around the country. But, I'll get to that eventually. But there's still things happening every day that need attention. In this case, we have the police in Michigan they're not warming up to the medical marijuana laws that are out there already, and they definitely don't like the new one that the state just passed. And after looking through this article here from MLive by Jonathan Oosting, I don't know if they've even read the new law, because in the new law there's a lot of restrictions, and they'll have a lot of work to do, apparently. And since the marijuana law passed in medical marijuana in 2008, the police have basically increased the arrests for marijuana crimes in general overall by a margin of about 17%. Now, they say that that's because they're busting dispensaries, and when you do that, you got to arrest a lot more people than just one arrest here, one arrest there, or whatever. And they have a bunch of other excuses, a whole bunch. And that's the problem, is we're not passing these laws to give you guys more excuses to arrest people. If anything, we're trying to take the crime away from these things so that people can actually operate like a normal business without worrying about the regulatory framework being unreasonable, or the regulatory enforcement being the police, and you go to prison if you do it wrong, or if you're off by a couple numbers or whatever. And since the law was passed, there's been a plethora of cases in Michigan that have made it to the Supreme Court, and maybe some of them have been through that and the Court of Appeals, or are at the Court of Appeals only. Some of them might not have been heard yet, but it seems like every time someone gets busted for marijuana and it's medical, it's an overreach. It's something that they wasn't breaking the medical marijuana law, but once you get in court, you can't even use it for a defense in most cases. So the police don't need more power. They've already got enough power, and they apparently believe they had more power after the law was passed. Now the new law has been passed, and they're kind of going crazy. So here's Howell Police Chief George Bassar, legislative chairman for the Michigan Association of Police Chiefs, says while law enforcement cannot support any legalization, by definition it is illegal under federal law due to the classification of marijuana. What we can do is find a position not to oppose having a tough and tight regulatory framework. He and other law enforcement officials testified Tuesday before the Senate Judiciary Committee, which is considering House-approved legislation that would allow the state to license and regulate medical marijuana dispensaries, growers, and other related businesses. Michigan medical marijuana law, approved by voters in 2008, creates a system where registered patients and caregivers can grow a limited number of plants, but it did not address the storefront dispensaries. And the Supreme Court in Michigan in 2012 ruled that dispensaries can be shut down as public nuisances. Law enforcement groups successfully blocked medical marijuana dispensary legislation last session, but sponsoring Rep. Mike Calton, a Republican from Nashville, Michigan, made a concerted effort to bring them to the table this year. Now, this guy is behind some of the laws and has been involved with the process of making the new medical marijuana laws that just passed. His new medical marijuana bill, which would impose a 3% tax on dispensaries' gross retail income, is part of a larger package that would also create a seed-to-sale tracking system for plants and establish rules for edible and other non-smokable forms of the drug. State Judiciary Chairman Rick Jones, a former Eaton County sheriff, generally supports the move towards regulated medical marijuana industry, but is sympathetic to the concerns from the law enforcement community. Their concerns really is that the more you take the crime out of marijuana, the less they have to do, or the less they can enforce marijuana. I don't know what their backstory is on why they really, really hate marijuana, but it seems like in state after state where marijuana is being legalized, you keep hearing about these police agencies in different counties and jurisdictions where they're like, this is bad. You know, marijuana legalization is making us work more. Well, really, they're not. It's not. It's making them work less, and they're not liking it. And I guess really what it is they like to arrest people for marijuana. They think marijuana is some kind of dirty scourge that, you know, only dirty people smoke, and dirty, you know, the right-wing attitude that you don't go to church and you smoke weed and you're lazy and you're a bum and all this right-wing horse shit. Well, a lot of cops feel like that. I've seen it time and time again. If you don't believe me, just watch some episodes of Cops. There you have it. You know, proof positive that when it comes to marijuana, they treat you like you're some kind of a animal, essentially, if you act like, or if you get caught with marijuana. And on the show Cops, which was, you know, syndicated for decades, as far as I know, it's almost like a show where they just show people getting arrested for marijuana, and just, you know, time and time again. Almost every episode has at least one marijuana arrest in it. And you start to see a pattern of how the police really treat people that are caught with marijuana. So anyway, he said, now we're talking about the Senate Judiciary Chairman Rick Jones, from a former Eaton County Sheriff. He says, I think we've reached the point of the wild, wild west out here right now. Republican from Grand Ledge, quote, apparently caregivers are selling their overage to dispensaries. There's not licensing. People don't know what they get. Now, it's true that caregivers probably do sell their overage to dispensaries. Why wouldn't they? They don't want to be sitting around with like tons of pot, because you guys said that caregivers can't stockpile marijuana for their patients and this and that. You know, you're basically making caregivers sitting ducks with the way the laws are written right now. We tried to pass more sensible laws, but you guys didn't like it. And then the new laws that came out doesn't really change a whole lot in the patient caregiver model, but it preserves it. And that's what you guys need to understand, is that you guys are way off base with any of these new demands that you have. You guys are the police. You're supposed to police the law, not write the law yourself. That's not what you guys are supposed to do. You get paid by us to police, to enforce laws, not to make new laws, or, you know, in this case, you're basically trying to take existing laws and change them, and that's not happening. It's not possible. But we're going to get into what they're trying to propose here. So I don't understand why you guys care about caregivers selling the overage to whoever. You know, it shouldn't matter, but, you know, it's just another thing that you guys can catch someone doing and give them a ticket for, and it makes you happy at the end of the day. Are you fighting crime? Are you doing anything to better society? No. You're just exercising authority, and at the end of the day, you're ruining someone's life, potentially. And then at the other end of the day, you might end up getting sued, or your police department getting sued, because this isn't happening anymore. People are sick of this bullshit, and they're taking you to court. They're not going to court and getting put in prison anymore. And there's this thing called jury nullification. And if you haven't heard of it, you might be hearing a little bit more of it the more you stick around in 2017, because jury nullification is basically when the jury is asked to prosecute somebody based on something that they feel is unlawful. And it doesn't even have to be that it is illegal or not. That doesn't matter. If they feel like this is trumped up charges, this isn't really legal, this shouldn't be illegal, in my opinion, they can just say, you know what, we all say this guy's good. He's good to go. See you later. Case closed. So you're going to see a lot more of the jury nullifications in the coming future, because of all the marijuana legalization that just happened in the election. And as 2017 rolls out, you're going to see state after state enacting their own marijuana legalization for many reasons that I'll get into in other stories later on. But currently we're talking about this one. So Wild Wild West or whatever. Now here's some of the changes that the cops want to do to the current system. Now the current system has been around since 2008. It was passed by the voters with a 67% margin. Landslide, 63% maybe. Anyway, it's a moratorium. It's basically a moratorium on it was supposed to be a moratorium and a mandate to the police to say, hey, if someone is doing this medical marijuana thing, you basically can't arrest them. But they did it anyway. They kept arresting people and busting dispensaries and seizing property. Michigan has really bad forfeiture laws, and you basically don't have any Fourth Amendment rights once the cops kick in your door. So they take everything they can, and the next thing you know it, you have to fight to get it back because you might not even be able to use medical marijuana as defense. So anyway, one of the things they want to do is get rid of the caregivers. You know, them pesky caregivers that give most of their weed away for free to patients that are under them. Or they're just caregivers for one other person because somebody might be disabled and can't grow their own, or maybe they're too poor to be able to afford to go to the dispensary or whatever. There's a lot of reasons why there's caregivers. Is there anybody getting rich out there being a caregiver? Nope. The law prohibits you from basically making money at all off of marijuana here in Michigan. So the idea that someone's getting rich in the medical marijuana world in Michigan is a funny one because I have not seen it. I don't know anybody that has. It's just like any other job, you know. Anyway, so let's see. If dispensaries are formally allowed, law enforcement groups would like the state to stop registering caregivers who are allowed to grow up to 12 plants for each of 5 patients in a secure location, including their home. As of last year, there were about 23,000 registered caregivers in Michigan and 96,000 patients. Look, man, you can't throw 23,000 people under the bus. You're the police anyway. You can't change the laws anyway. This is just recommendations. The police were asked, hey, what do you think about these new laws during this judiciary hearing in the Senate? And they were like, this is how we feel about it. And you'll see how ridiculous it is. So yeah, get rid of all these caregivers, because guess what? That's competition for the new people that are coming in to take over the marijuana industry. That's terrible. But that's not what they said. That's just my opinion. That's just one angle that a lot of people on message boards are saying. They're like, oh yeah, they're using the police as the corporate bully arm to, you know, basically beat back anybody that's small, and not just small, trying to start up their own little grow operation or their own little dispensary under the new Medical Marijuana Facilities Act in Michigan. But what they are talking about here is cracking down on caregivers who, like I said, mostly give their weed away for free to the patients. And in Michigan, until recently, the only thing that was considered medicine was actually weed, like dried bud. So they want to get rid of that. Once the system is up and running, they say, there will be no need for caregivers to grow a product, since the patient will be able to access marijuana at the dispensaries. Like I said, not all patients can afford it. Not all patients can access it because they're disabled. They might not be able to get to there. That was the Ingham County Sheriff Gene Wrigglesworth, who testified on behalf of the Michigan Sheriff's Association. So you'll notice a pattern here. All these police agencies and police things have representation at this hearing. You know who don't? I haven't heard anything from people that run dispensaries or do anything in the way of actually running towns where they have medical marijuana dispensaries and stuff, doing things and asking their opinion. So then we have Sergeant Amy Denner of Michigan State Police, and the agency remains concerned that extra marijuana grown by caregivers, known as overage, will make its way to the black market, and the Michigan State Police does not support allowing caregivers to sell to dispensaries. Well, maybe it's time that they say that they allow caregivers should be allowed to sell to somebody, you know. Maybe. I'm just saying. It sounds like you guys are just kind of like putting caregivers in a unique position where they have this extra marijuana that you can bust them with, or you can catch them selling it. So the smart choice would probably just be sit on it. You know, it's only going to be there for so long until you just give it away to your patients. So I don't know what the big deal is. Anyway, she says, we don't have an answer for the overage other than it's either either phase out or completely get rid of the caregiver model, she said. That's not an option. This phasing out thing, why don't you write a petition, get it approved by the petition board, Sergeant Amy Denner. I mean, you're with the state police. You should be able to have the ability to get this thing on the ground. You know, get a petition together and go out and get the required amount of signatures. I believe it's around 280,000. And you got to do that in like 6 months. And then get that on the ballot and put that to a vote to the people and see how they feel about that. As far as phasing out or getting rid of the caregiver model. Because we voted for it. 63% of the state said yes. We want these laws. The caregiver patient model is what they voted for. You can't just say, oh, we're going to take that away. So that's not even an option. So thanks for the recommendation, but nope, that's not an option. Doing so would confirm the worst fears of medical marijuana activists who believe the reform efforts is to attempt to undermine the caregiver model, which of course, I don't know why they're trying to undermine the caregiver model so bad here. It looks kind of suspicious. Like the only reason they would have to do it is to pave the way for the big interest people to come in and take over the medical marijuana industry with these new facilities, because they'll set the rates to get into these facilities so high that no one on the bottom can afford to get it. And next thing you know, medical marijuana in Michigan, not recreational, medical marijuana in Michigan will be controlled by only like super rich corporate interests. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, it's what it looks like, man. That doesn't look good. So anyway, well, what does Rick Thompson say? He says, this is what patients and caregivers have been worried about since the start of the legislative process back in 2011, when they first started writing these new marijuana laws. He's a board member for Michigan NORML, by the way, in case you don't know who Rick Thompson is. Quote, we've never seen law enforcement agencies openly speak about destroying a core value of the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act until now, but they spoke about it so casually it almost made it seem as though the decision had already been made. And yeah, that's like Trump coming in and saying Obamacare, gut it all, including the part where it says pre-existing conditions, which I think is the one part where he said we're definitely going to keep that. But that would be a kind of an equivalent, like, oh, well, pre-existing conditions, like you're throwing so many people under the bus right now just by saying get rid of that, that would upend the whole system. And that's what this would do. You can't just be like, oh, we're just going to upend the whole system. Can't happen, man. And why can't that happen? Well, in order for that to happen, in order for them to get rid of this caregiver patient model, it would take 3/4 supermajority vote in the House and the Senate to get this thing through. That's not going to happen. Because, first of all, Jones, who is... Anyway, Jones made it clear that that was not the intent of the legislation that they just passed. You know, the current legislation wasn't intended to crush the old medical marijuana system. In fact, if you read it, it only just adds medibles and, you know, to the old law. It just adds medibles and concentrates to the old law and transportation. It adds a little transportation stuff to the old law, and then it has some new laws that do a whole bunch of other things. But none of it says anything about let's get rid of the caregiver patient model. It's just not there. And the reason for that is because marijuana policy people from our side actually did help chisel away these new laws, believe it or not. I mean, these new laws aren't as bad as a lot of people are hyping them out to be. You might have seen one or two of my videos talking about the new laws. As long as something like this don't happen, where the state police are going around just shutting people down and they're making new rules about caregiver and patient models. But like you just heard me say, there's no way that's going to happen. You know what? A 75% supermajority is almost impossible anytime for any reason. Unless you're in Michigan, you're talking about, well, it's a pretty red legislator. You got Republican-led Senate, Republican-led House, the Supreme Court in Michigan stacked Republican, and of course Governor, lead pipe Snyder. So as the story goes, it would be hard for a legislator to eliminate the caregiver system, like I said. Thompson, who was frustrated that there was no public comment, period, during Tuesday's hearing, said he is concerned that a court ruling or legal interpretation could jeopardize the caregiver model in the future. Now, that's true, and having him said that, somebody might have picked up on that, or they might already know the system good enough to know that, that's probably their goal is to set up a trip line and have someone trip over it or whatever. But the problem is this thing that they're working on right now is what you call a public record. And if you don't have public comment in the public record to counter any of the points that they made that I just countered, you heard me, it took me a long time. I'm over 20 minutes countering their points, and I'm not even done yet. In fact, I'm not even going to go through this because the rest of it doesn't have anything to do with the old caregiver-patient model, and that's kind of what I wanted to just touch on. But I'm going to tell you I'm just going to bullet point it and get it out of here. So another thing they were talking about doing is outlawing Uber weed, or some kind of weed delivery service where you can call up the dude and they drive over your house with a car shaped like a pot leaf, and it runs on marijuana, so of course it stinks up the whole area as you're driving through to deliver the weed to people. So they want to outlaw that, and rightfully so. But seriously, not being funny or whatnot, Uber weed, come on, there's no such thing. And they're talking about using unarmed trucks or unmarked trucks with at least 2 people in all time. Basically, she said we should have this. The legislature should consider additional regulations for transporters. And everything she says after that is already in the law. And then there's another one where she acknowledged that tight transportation regulations could create a monopoly-like system, blah, 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 blah. It's that already in the law. And then transportation is just as big as part of this licensing thing as other things within the structure. I don't get what. Why is transportation more of a thing to worry about than a grow facility? Like where you have electricity and like thousands of watts and multiple people working there. And then there's this local inspections thing, which, by the way, you might have remember me mentioning this person Wigglesworth, who was the Sheriff Gene Wigglesworth from Ingham County, representing the Michigan Sheriff's Association, basically says that registered caregivers should be subject to similar licensing and inspection rules. A proposal that did not sit well with the activists. Yeah. Now the thing is they probably booed him. I love that they said that, a proposal that didn't sit well with the activists. The activists were sitting there listening to this shit, and when he said that, they probably booed. I wish I was there. No, we never signed on to these inspections. And if you look at our marijuana law that we follow, the caregivers and patients, there's no inspection. We didn't agree to be inspected. In fact, we don't agree to even let the police see the registry so that they can kind of henpick around the area and see who they want to just investigate or go kick a door in or do a knock and talk or whatever you want to do, You just got to know your rights, people. Know your rights, know how to follow the law, and follow the law. These new ones coming in, man, who knows if we're going to be able to get in on these facilities. I personally don't want to be. I got other things I do with my life, and I'm not trying to run one of these commercial marijuana facilities or one of these dispensaries or any of that. I know there's people to fill those positions. I'm not worried about it. So, anyway, yeah, this is basically saying that the cops can come in your house at any time they want and just search, look around, count your plants, do whatever they feel like, kind of be like regulators. Now, that's all fine and dandy, but why has it got to be the police? Oh, I know, because if they find you with 2 more plants than you're supposed to, you're only allowed to have 72 plants, but you got 75. Go to jail, get a felony, lose your medical cards. No, that's not how it should be. No other business has regulations so strict that you can actually go to prison if you do them a little bit wrong. And you're all acting like someone's out here making millions of dollars off of marijuana. You already have mechanisms in place to snarl somebody that's getting over on the system or whatever. It's called taxes. And you guys don't even let people get business loans. You don't let people pay taxes. You basically don't want anybody to make any money off of marijuana. Why? We're trying to take it out of the black market, and you're trying to push it back in there, and then you're trying to say that it's going to be in the black market. Oh, this overage, black market. You know, if you don't want a black market, you would get rid of the black market by legislatively getting rid of the black market, saying there is no black market. A caregiver can sell to any patient he wants. You can sell it to the dispensary if you feel like it. Big deal. Oh, I got to go get it tested at a lab. No one cares. I'll go get it tested at a lab. All right, so... Oh, and they also said that they wanted to get money from the dispensary tax revenue, the police do. And this is Wigglesworth again, representing the sheriff's departments. Incidentally, there's already a provision that gives 5% to counties with facilities in them. So unless you say, oh, we don't want a facility in our county, you get part of that chunk of 5% of the whole overall tax. So you already get that, you know. That's a lot of money right there. Now, they also say that they wanted to have this thing where the Michigan Associations of Chiefs of Police suggested that law enforcement should have access to any databases of licensees so we're able to quickly and easily confirm individuals' standing. That's already in the new law, and not only is it in the new law, but that's the only thing in the new law that attaches caregivers and patients to the tracking system. It's already in the new law. Why don't you guys read the new law instead of just go out there and say all the things that you want to do to arrest people still for marijuana? Because what you're saying with that one, and it's clear as a day, you want this database so that you can set it up to be searchable every day and find people that have lapsed by like a day that have a grow operation. Oh, here's a caregiver. His card right here, he's got 5 cards and 2 of them are expired. Go kick his door in. Because he's lazy or because he had too much shit to do that week. Anyway, that's already there. Strengthening drug driving laws. Well, there's already something about drug driving laws in the new law. But there's no science on this. So all these people talking about this is just full of shit. And then they got this statistics. So, oh, the places where, where they legalized it, it's a problem. No, it's not. It's not a problem. They say state police have seen a spike in the number of cases where cannabinoids were detected in driver systems since the medical marijuana law took effect, she said, topping out at 91 cases in 2012. By the way, they didn't test for THC in every single car accident before all these laws passed. So this again is an overreach and an over-exaggeration of a problem that doesn't even exist. You get in a wreck, and all of a sudden they find marijuana, the THC in your system, which could have been there for 30 or more days. Now all of a sudden they can put together statistics and say, oh, drug driving. No, the wreck was caused by something else. Accidents happen. A lot of times you're talking about impaired accidents. Well, alcohol was involved or some other narcotics. There's just no way to really reliably be like, okay, this guy has this much THC in his system, so he's fucked up. He can't drive. You know what, man? I have yet to see anybody prove that driving on marijuana is dangerous. Prove that first. Stop acting like the burden of proof is on people that are pro-marijuana. There is no proof that anybody driving on any amount of marijuana is dangerous. Now, should you drive if you're on so much marijuana you can barely keep your eyes open because you're tired as shit? No, and you probably won't because you're probably going to be too paranoid to fucking drive if you're that high. So all this shit that these cops are talking about, and hey, cops, don't come after me because I'm calling you out on this. This is just bullshit. Everything you guys are like, hey, we need to do this, and why ain't they doing that? They already are, all of it, almost every one of them. But when you're talking about taking away my rights, when you're talking about you're the police officer, your job, we pay you to enforce laws that are already there. All right, that's it. We don't pay you to go in there and say, oh, you know what, we need these to be laws so we can enforce them. Ha ha ha. That's not your job. Your job ain't that. And you don't know what's going on in that regard. You're not supposed to be qualified to know the nuances of the details of laws, so which to tweak them in the favor of you being able to make more arrests. All right, that's all I got on this. I would talk more about it, but like I said, I don't want to make the police officers mad at me and just start investigating me and coming after me just because I don't like what they said about taking away my caregiver patient model that me and most of Michigan voted for.